So we're going to get started with the seminar, the Predicta project, A Car for All Scales. And presenting that is Mark Gustavson, Bob Wick, Steve Roullier, Lynn Koberna, and Jim Fernandez. So I'm turning this over to Mark.
I'll start. First of all, welcome to all of you. And may I just take a moment of personal indulgence and thank Bob Shelton again for this beautiful watercolor he did for me last night that you signed, Daryl. This is a treasured part of my collection. Thank you very much. Bob's here. Oh, hi Bob. Thank you very much. I just had to show it to the group. I stared. This was sitting like an icon on my wall. It kept me awake half the night. So thanks a lot. It's really beautiful. So thank you kindly. I don't want that damage. Okay. Anyway, for any of you who have ever known my background, I have had what amounts to a psychological obsession with this car since I was about 13 years old. When I was a kid, I had a lot of surgery. I won't go into it, but I was in the hospital a lot, and I was recuperating at home a lot. And one of the things that my father helped me recreate with to keep my mind off things was model building. And so in the late 50s, he bought me kits. And by the time all the hospital stuff was going on, it was 64. And I indicated to my dad, because I'd read about the Predicta in the Carcraft 1960 issue, that I wanted some kits. So we had to buy these 4 or 5 of them, piles of glue and paint, and I built them all so poorly they weren't even recognizable. They're just awful. But there was this obsession I had. It was this fantasy I had. I could imagine Daryl driving down the freeway and all the rest, and it just went on for a long time. And as I even through college and early marriage, my wife thought I was nuts, and she was probably correct. But I learned thereafter about all the different versions of the car, and there have been a lot. This is a story that my book comes out toward the end of this year. You will literally not believe. This is a story of almost Greek proportions. This car went everywhere, did everything, was owned by a lot of folks, abused by some. And it's a fascinating story. You can see all the various versions here. Essentially the initial version here, actually the construction here, Daryl used a completely trashed out 56 Thunderbird and pieced it back together in ways that only an alchemist could. Then it showed up in this version. It won all sorts of major awards. Here it is in March of 1960. Daryl, this photograph came in from the son of a fellow who took that photograph in March of 1960. And we have all these sorts of photographs. Here's Daryl driving down a drag strip. Garlitz bet him that he wouldn't drive. It couldn't be navigated, it couldn't be operated, and Daryl said, well, guess what? Drove at 102 miles an hour down a freeway, and we have a series of these photographs of that car being driven at that meet, and since then others have shown up. So you've got this, and then when the monogram era came along, it was restyled here. We've got wonderful photographs of the car being restyled in his original shop that Jim Fernandez will discuss with you later. Then, of course, here's the version that was submitted in the kit. Monogram took possession and ownership. Later, the car was won in a contest in Model Car Science magazine, if you can imagine, in 1969 rather. The contest was announced and awarded in mid-1970. And it went to Daryl Zip, and we'll talk about more of this in the future, but he was a product manager for Revell. You can imagine the conflict between Revell and Monogram at the point. Then Daryl sold it at the Winter Nationals Car Show in 1970, and a fellow from American Chopper got a hold of it and cut a hole in the hood and abused the car and painted it metal flake silver. Daryl saw it years later and spun off the freeway and bought it and took it home, restored it and so forth. Oh, down here in the lower right, whoops, oh boy. This lower right-hand corner down here, that's when the Motor Life awarded Daryl a top award for the car. That's literally its first version right there. Taken in the same park that these later photographs were taken. Daryl liked that park wherever that was, a beautiful place to take photographs. But I grew up with all of this, and then as a kid, I would read Carcraft magazines and I would read small volumes like these. I've since, over the last 35 or 40 years, I've acquired a very extensive collection of these magazines. I've researched them, they show up in the bibliography for the book, and these all had, well, that's great. these all had stories about one aspect or another of the car, or the car showed up in certain shows and all the rest. And so all of that kind of thing, and I would read literally everything there was on the car. I became more and more fascinated with it, and therefore the project. I was out of law school about 4 years, and I finally decided to get serious, and I contacted Daryl. I'd never spoken to him or written to him before, found his address somehow, and wrote a letter. I was hoping for an answer, but not expecting one. I didn't know you, Daryl, and the graciousness of the letter that came back started a 35 or nearly 40-year correspondence record I've had with the Starbirds, and without fail, they've been patient, and boy, it's taken patience with me. They've responded to every letter, lent me photographs. It has been a remarkable experience. I visited the Starbirds in 1995 when they just opened their Rod Custom Museum, and it's been a terrific experience. So this is sort of the start of the project. Here are all the people that have, I can't see them from here, all the people that are involved. You can read the names. All the people that are involved in this project, some of which are up here. And I think it's important to give credit to all those who are contributing, because there's no way on earth, either by talent or skill, that I could ever do a small particle of this. So I want to give tribute to these fellows here and those additionally up on the screen, and those who have assisted in this project through all the years. So let's start to talk a little bit how this obsession started in me. At Starbird's original shop, outside the original shop, it wasn't paved. It was this dirt, gravel kind of presentation with the railroad tracks in the background. And here's this photograph. I did some research, and a guy contacted me, and he sent me this photograph. And here's the car in its second version, because the copper grille is not there. It's been plated, and he's got the chrome bullets up front rather than the Cadillac taillights. But you see the car is being regularly driven, and it's sitting just inside the rough railroad tracks outside his original shop. So this kind of photograph. And then, of course, here's the very famous Carcraft issue, where Dick Day, the editor, editorialized in favor of the car and spoke glowingly of it, about its innovations and its thoughtful styling and so forth. You'll notice that the bubble top, you see the bubble top has been airbrushed on, those days not digitalized, because the top hadn't yet been fit in Winfield's shop. Daryl hauled the car across the country unfinished, essentially, because the top hadn't been fit to meet the deadline. And so the folks at Carcraft did the bubble top. You see there's no bubble here. This also was airbrushed on.
Can I correct that for a minute, Mark?
Please. No, go ahead.
Actually, it isn't airbrushed on. After Oakland, California, I took the car out there without the top on it, and they shipped it to me out
Yes.
in the Oakland show. I then took it to Monterey to Bill Cushenberry's shop, and I cut the flange off of it, and that is the top sitting on there, but it's not actually attached to anything, it's just sitting on there.
Oh.
And if you look, well, it's not so much in this photo, but some of the photos, if you look real close, Dick Day is holding one side of the top with his hand, and I'm holding the other side. You don't see it in the photo. That's what the story was.
Well, thank you for that
So
correction.
both shots are actually with the top, but just sitting on it. So,
Well, you can see what a remarkable. Think of all of the tasteless customs done in that era, and here comes a car so elegant and so understated. And again, the editorial, I think unique in all of Carcraft history, from editors spoke so glowingly of the car. And it was a wonderful thing. And of course, Carcraft magazine featured it down here. Top 10 customs in the country. And while I admire some of these cars, particularly the Jade Idol here, compare the elegance and simplicity of this to this. That's my own personal judgment, but I think pretty much correct about that. Here is the second version of the car, in a 5 or 6 page feature article in this issue too. In 1995, when I was a much younger man, I had the pleasure of building the box art model for the 1990 issue. And Monogram sent it back, and I was very pleased and honored to present it to Daryl in his then just barely opened Rod Custom Museum. As my interest matured, I of course learned that the car had been restyled, I think much better for the second version. You can tell that Daryl rolled the rear wheel wells. A result, the trunk was originally a hood and it had an open end on it. He rolled that into the rear pan, changed the taillights and headlights and so forth. And I know he didn't like the color. A monogram sort of twisted his arm and forced the issue, but it did look nice in red. Whoops. So, why the project? Well, in the early days, Daryl would write a column for the very small car, particularly for Car Model magazine. And of course, when I was a kid, I'd read these. I had a subscription, you can imagine, as a 14-year-old. And I'd read these articles and read the pieces he wrote. You can see him sitting in the, that's the forecast, or is that forecast or is that your Thunderbird? I can't see it clearly from here.
Forecasted.
Okay, and then down here, of course, Daryl taught you how to customize the Predicta. It's a really cool article. There'll be a citation in the book to that piece. And then, of course, you came along, and this is from Model Car Science magazine, I believe. There were articles about how to paint, and you see, of course, I did not fail to notice this when I was 14 or 15 years old. So I would read all of these articles wherever I could find them. And then I started to learn more about history when Daryl started to teach me about it and corrected a lot of assumptions I'd made. And of course, the Predicta was influenced by, and certainly this car preceded the Predicta. This was La Pearl, and it was Bob Turgeon, his name. National Show winner, Daryl really struck big gold with this one. It's featured in all magazines. There are dozens of citations to this car. But you notice there's a certain similarity with the front grille work. And it was painted a candy red, Daryl, do I remember correctly, or a brandywine color. Yeah, it was a beautiful car. And then I started to learn about the car itself, the Predicta itself. This is something like what Daryl started with. If I remember the story correctly, Daryl called up his buddy Jerry Titus and said to him, I need to build a Predicta, as Daryl explained last night, and I found one in the junkyard. Well, this is pretty much what it was. It had been sideswiped by something. And even in those days, remember, 55, 60, 57 Thunderbirds were just a few years old and undoubtedly expensive to buy a good one. So Daryl, with his enormous talents in the back pocket, bought this and then started to reskin it. 59 Buick, I think 59 Buick rear quarter panels. You can see here how the rear wheel wells has been about to cut. See how he cut the fin and tacked it into the door here? Here's the driver's side, of course. The left side, I suppose, as you could drive it on the side. Of interest to you historically, look at the headlights. It initially had vertical headlights until Daryl thought better of it and made the decision he did. But look at the character line. It was a piece of steel, and Daryl said last night he didn't use a plastic filler. It's all welded, all hammer welded in the ground. This is when people did real body work. And here's the car, the first version of the car finished after Oakland, the Monterey show, and so forth. This was in a mall somewhere in the Midwest, with the hood up, of course, and it was shown with placards and stanchions around it. I have found a lot of these photographs from people who just sent them to me. It's really cool history. I don't remember what show this is from, Daryl, perhaps you can remember, but here it is at a show with the bubble off it. This may be, is this Oakland, perhaps? Because the bubble's not fit to it.
That's actually when I took it to Oakland the first time. You see the bubble sitting over there.
Off to the, see right there?
This is the way I took it out there and didn't have the bubble, and they shipped the bubble to me, and I set it over there. Because it's a 10-day show.
Right. And here's the car, finished car, sitting in his driveway. Daryl lent me a half dozen or so of these photographs. You'll notice it has pinstriping on it. Daryl later took off. Who did the pinstriping, Daryl? Do you remember? Some local fellow did it. I have it in the book.
Yeah, Steve Parks, I think.
Okay.
His name, Steve Parks.
You can see Daryl's styling sense. He integrated all these lines together rather than just pasting on panels. He pulled the car together as a visual statement. And here he is at the drag strip. These are photographs sent to me by Don Elliott, who has since passed. He was a photographer for some newspapers down there, and he took these photographs. There are a series of about a dozen of them. And you can see this is the first version of the car, and There's Daryl sitting in it with, of course, ubiquitous guys dressed in the white outfits ready to time the car going down the strip. Daryl changed the rear grille. You remember the original one had painted Cadillac taillights. He put a flat metal pen on there and put these chrome bullets, the outer three of which worked. This is the pre-monogram version. You notice that the trunk area, if you will, was up like this. He later welded that, smoothed that off into the rear area when he restyled it for. These photographs are kind of jumping around here. Here's the one from Motor Life magazine, taken in that park again.
That's Oak Park.
I'm sorry?
Oak Park.
Oak Park, okay. You'll notice that it has Lancer hubcaps back on it here. When he took the car to Oakland, he borrowed the custom chrome reverse rims from Bob Turgeon, who was very gracious and lent them to him. But here they're back with, I guess Turgeon needed them back, and here are these Lancer hubcaps with the spinners. How old were you here, Daryl?
Very young.
Thank you.
I actually built the Predicta when I was 26, so that was about 27.
Wow. Quite an achievement, especially in the short number of weeks we took to build a car. This is a new photograph that I acquired through an ad I placed in Customs Illustrated, Luke Carossi's publication. And this guy sent me in 4 or 5 of these. These have been cleaned up a bit digitally because they were quite beat up. But here is, that's your Buick, isn't it, Daryl?
Yes, it is. 59
Okay,
Buick.
towing, here's the trailer, and here's the car sitting right behind it. At a second, this is not the garless drag strip time, this is secondary time. And you can tell also by color and also by style, this is the pre-monogram version because this rear wheel well has not been flared. There's a later version of the car with the original, again, these photographs are not necessarily in chronological order, the original taillights here, the painted Cadillac bullets. This was a 56 Mopar color or something, it's pretty much a standard color.
No, I just mixed the color.
Did you really?
And it's actually, this is a very faded look of it. It's
Yeah.
much bluer than that, actually. I imagine the old transparency we used here lost a lot of color over the years, because
Yeah.
it was never that exact color. So
Right.
it was a lot brighter blue than that to start with.
And we've got better photographs than that.
Yeah.
Some of these I've left alone just to show the patina of age.
Actually, that shot is taken in Bakersfield, California, at a fairgrounds where we were having a car show with George Barris. He put the show on.
Yes.
That's where I took the car later.
You notice at this time the full ring is on the bubble.
Right.
And in this case, that ring sat atop the doors in the front cowl area. When Daryl restyled it, he recessed it down into the body for a much more elegant look. Now, the next thing, I've got something really rare to show you here. In late 1962, when Daryl struck the deal with Monogram, he had the car traded back to them. And they ran the car outside, took photographs. They had some guy hanging out the window, I'll remember his name. Had a big 2 or 3 story warehouse, and there was a fellow who had a big yard arm that came out, and this guy went and leaned over it and strapped himself onto it to get vertical shots of the car. And then they Monogram pasted it together. Now, this is their crude, literally scissors, and there was no digitalization in those days, certainly.
Mark, can you hold that up?
This is the way they simply pasted it together. Now, Mr. Roullier here has done a version where we're attempting, we still have more work to do, but we're attempting to clean this up you notice there are inconsistencies with the width and so forth. But we've got the length of the car, so now Steve is adjusting the image to fit the actual dimensions so we can get a really good image. The first attempt of that is this next photograph. That's the first, and we have more work to do, but that's the first down look. Now, of course, there is a lot of parallax involved in that. It's not, while it is sourced in a series of photographs pasted together, it still stretches out when it goes north and south. But this is the only known overhead photograph of the car, and it comes out of this other effort. And again, more work to do. You can see the curve of the hood here, and the curve of the hood here, and the peak, the natural peak of that. When it's a Monogram, remember they didn't have digital scanners, Lynn. They didn't have anything like that. They ran tape, Jim Keeler described this to me some time ago when Revell did the same thing with Roth's cars. But they literally took, it looks like 1 inch or 1¼ inch tape, and they ran it over the car because, of course, the color and the reflections of the paint distract the eye from seeing what's really there. You don't see all the curves. And so they would do this in a very analog fashion, and they covered the whole car with tape. Just an amazing set of photographs. This fellow here, and I'll remember the names in the book, he's the guy that hung out the window. He was a very brave fellow. You can see all the tape lines here across the bubble. You know, this is quite a complex shape through here. And then, of course, they would photograph from this angle, take multiple photographs of it from several angles to get some sense about what the shape was like. Then, of course, the car went back to Darrell for his restyling. Darrell did the same thing, running the tape lines here. But as I recall the story, Ron and Graham never sent anyone out to Darrell's shop when the car was being done. Darrell did this, sent the photographs back to them. But that was it. One of my historic theories is that's the reason the model is so badly inaccurate, because they never had the right people taking the measurements. You'll notice here that this line, this in-cut line, is invaded by the upper radius of this flare. On the kit, the whole radius is down. It's not correct. I mean, it's badly incorrect. And perhaps the reason is Bob Reeder couldn't be persuaded to send someone to Darrell's shop, but there's evidence that Darrell did that, and then he sent these photographs to them. You can see again more of this here. Darrell built a new splitter for the top. You can see it recessed into the top of the body now. It opens like this. You see, the body comes in, and this thing sits flush rather than sitting atop it. Big improvement there. And here's a shot from the back. In this original building of his, and Jim Fernandez will tell you about that later, but you can see all the weld down here. See how this, my gosh, see how this fits in kind of flush here? Just a ton of work to get that done. And of course, we've seen this shot before, but here's how the back gets resolved. This now has a nice peak going forward on it with a couple of so-called radio antennas in the front of it. And it's a much more elegant view, of course. There's a piece of red plexi sat behind these. They were polished aluminum, weren't they, Darrell?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And the ends had the lights over the left and right side. And here's the redone interior. You may remember the photograph a while ago. It had flat panels and essentially reupholstered factory seats. Darrell, of course, restyled it and designed these seats. And this wraparound dashboard, if you will, all heavily padded. It was white frieze, wasn't it, Darrell, with buttons on it, rhinestones or something on it?
What?
Was it white frieze, the fabric?
White frisee.
Okay, frisee.
It's a furniture upholstery material.
Okay.
They used in them days. I might add a little thing there since you asked me a question. The difference between the car that was originally taken to Monogram, which we delivered it up there, and they measured those, which you saw the pictures of it there a minute ago. I had a fellow work for me named Roger Hatchett that took the car up there in a trailer, and on the way back, bringing it back a few months later, we picked it up and brought it back, or a few weeks later actually, after Monogram measured it, brought it back to restyle it. Well, they didn't know I was going to restyle it. They thought I was restoring it. And on the way back, Roger put the trailer and the car in the ditch in the ice storm and tore up the whole side of the Predicta. And that's when I actually restyled it, because it got tore up. And that's why you saw it in primer that time in the shop.
Yeah.
We did that because it got hurt coming back. I'd forgotten that when we originally talked.
We'll talk later. I'll add that to the book. Yeah. Bob points out something interesting. Remember, this car could be, with the sticks here, the central steering, it could be driven from either front seat. Look at the pedals over here. Now, Bob Wick, a project participant, has been working with Darrell and a local mechanic named Mike Smith to work out the technical aspects of how Darrell innovatively worked out the very complex steering system and the double drive pedals and so forth. but this car literally could be and was driven from both sides. This, by the way, was not a Predicta television, it was an Admiral. But it did look really cool, Daryl.
Is that a mirror interior on the door? Is that a mirror? What's on
Where-
the,
you
on the,
mean-
on the
you-
far door? What is that a mirror?
Are you talking here?
Yeah.
That's a piece of chrome.
Chrome steel.
Oh, it's, oh, okay.
You notice also, you see in the original version, this extension did not exist. Darrow sought to integrate this with the doors, you see? So when this door is closed, this part actually sits out and it's closed. These are coplanar with one another. So you have an integrated dash and door panel. It's pretty thoughtful stuff. And here he's standing as a 27-year-old, 28-year-old by the car, a publicity shot taken for Monogram in Oak Park. We're jumping a lot here because we have a lot of material to cover. After the kit debuted in '64, it was shown around the country in 4 or 5 venues, and then it largely disappeared. One of the real mysteries of this car is that from about 1966 through '68, there is almost no media coverage of it. I have found one article on it, so one of these little small publications. Monogram's promotion of it apparently was successful, and they didn't display it much. There was certainly no further media attention, but they would haul it around. Monogram hauled this car all over the place on a trailer. But what do you notice about the car? Because it's important to a later part of the history. Look in the wheel well. See how dirty it is? If this were a high resolution picture, you could see that the grill, somebody has just taken looked like a dry cloth and just buffed off the front of it. There's dirt in here, there's dirt, there are chips all along here, chips here, chips back here. This is filthy. The tires obviously have been driven on crappy roads. At this point, Monogram was just hauling the car back to the warehouse and just throwing it on a trailer and wiping it down with a towel and taking it to the next show. There wasn't a lot of care in this era. I asked Bob Reeder about this in the early, probably 2000, and he said he had no explanation for it. He was busy with other things.
You just can't get good help.
Yeah. So we have a series of these photographs in the book too, showing how essentially the car had not been cared for in aesthetic sense, and who knows what it was like mechanically. You'll notice also, and this is interesting, do you see the dirt showing through the front of the hood opening? You see the other shots when Darrell had the car, that was as clean as a pin, it was red, darker red, but there wasn't this obvious dirt sitting there. Now, in late 1969, Monogram wanted, well, let's back up a second. In the October 1967 issue of Carcraft magazine, Monogram decided to sell the little coffin in the Predicta. About a year earlier, they had given away the Orange Hauler Ultra Truck and the Big Deuce. You sent in a postcard and they gave the cars away, and they were not well appreciated, and it really ticked, Bob Reeder said it really ticked him off. So they decided to sell the cars. The 2 remaining cars they had at that point, the 2 remaining Starbird cars they had, which were, well, Darrell worked significantly on the little coffin in the Predicta. So they placed an ad in this issue, and here's what that ad looked like. This has been scanned at very high resolution and then digitalized and cleaned up. And this appeared on a right, as you face the magazine, a left-hand page, right near the back 20% of the magazine. And this is what the ad was. Darrell has later told me that they did not call Darrell and tell him the car was for sale. You notice it says reasonable. Now, Darrell, not knowing of the availability of the Predicta, bought the little coffin, but they never told him the Predicta was for sale. So the Predicta, when it didn't sell, sat in their warehouse. That needs to stay here. It sat in the warehouse until late 1969, when Reeder told me, in correspondence, I had extensive correspondence with him. He said they just decided they didn't want the car anymore, so they wanted to give it away in a way that would best advantage the company, I suppose. So they went to Brick Price at Model Car Science magazine and said, will you create a contest where the entrant has to build the Dream Dragster, using only parts markets, of course. And you, Brick Price, and a couple other people, last name Hoy and one other fellow, Ray Hoy? Okay, that's right. It was one other guy, I can't remember. we'll judge the contest and we'll give the car away to the right person. There were 4 articles that promoted this contest over 4 separate issues and sequence. They had, and the photographs they used were not those of the revised car. They were the car, pictures of the car in its original form when first delivered to Monogram. Why they didn't use the others, and they had them because Bob Harney gave me everything they had. They had photographs of the restyle car, but they used the 1962 version essentially. And who knows why, but that's the version they promoted in the magazine article. So, this fellow, his name is Darryl Zip. You may know him as the owner of Zipper Motors and so forth. He was then product manager for Revell. He was 23 years old, had been hired by, Jim could tell you who was there at the time. But this is a shot of him at his desk. He worked, he said, for 6 or 7 weeks, all hours into the night to produce the Dream Dragster. Really wild front engine, largely scratch built, frame with aircraft engines and working butterflies and all the rest. Darryl submitted that and won the contest. So at that point, Monogram didn't contact him, so he eventually called Monogram, talked to Reader, and Reader, Darryl has represented to me that Reader didn't like the fact that a guy from Monogram and a guy in management of Monogram, or excuse me, Revell, had won the car from Monogram, and it was kind of a contentious conversation. Monogram had originally intended to send the car out in an enclosed trailer. They, as we later learned, I confirmed to Darryl that the car had been repainted sometime before the beat-up version you saw, the version delivered to Darryl. So they hauled it on an open trailer, strapped down with chains, towed behind a '68 Oldsmobile Tornado, and went across the country that way. Kind of disrespectfully, I think, but that was the position Monogram took. And so it was delivered to his front yard, or to his front home. He lived in Buena Vista, I believe. And when they chained it down, they crushed the rear brake line, ruptured it. It was leaking fluid from all over the place on the trailer. So Darryl got into it, started it up, it ran just fine, but it shot back off the trailer and almost ran over his newborn little girl and his wife. Ended up in a hedgerow of flowers, not damaged, but and almost hit a neighbor too. So they later found out underneath that the line had been crushed. You know, the line goes between the two brakes. It had just been crushed and it wasn't holding fluid. And there was no brake at all, no brake action. So they repaired it. And so all these stories in a lot more detail than that are recounted in the book. Here's the car in the condition it was delivered. This is taken on the street outside Darryl Zip's home. This particular photograph was given to me by Bob Johnson, who used to work for Revell. He gave me a series of 3 or 4 slides that they were sent, but these were taken by, some of them were taken by the fellow who delivered it, others were taken by Darryl Zip, but Bob Johnson gave them to me a long time ago. After that, Darryl, he liked the car, got it repaired, fixed those things, but he couldn't drive it. The California people wouldn't license it. It didn't have license plates. It didn't have all sorts of equipment that the California Highway Patrol deemed necessary. So Darryl Zip put it up for sale. This is in the 1970 Winter Nationals car show. He polished it up, put a coat of wax on it, put it down there, and notice the sign. Well, maybe back up and put a dog on it. And if you look at it carefully, it says very reasonable. This car, he told me at the time, it was in pristine condition. Whoever had painted it had done a really good job. They had taped off the doors and they had taped the upholstery off. It was no, Earl Scheib kind of job. It was a nice job. And it was still, the detailing underneath the chrome was all good and so forth. But, so he put it in the show, and the only guy that approached him was the owner of American Chopper, who promised him that he would build Darryl Zip a bike and give him $1,250 or $1,270. Darryl got the bike, but never the money. And he delivered the car. The guy from American Chopper wanted the car right away. And so he took possession of the car and took Darryl Zip 18 or so months to get his bike and never got the money. So who knows what the heck American Chopper did with it. But they painted it. This is a later version of it, but there's another version. But they cut a hole in the hood and painted it this awful, heavy metal flake silver. Later, a restorer named Carl Green, who was one of the fellows that rescued the Dream Truck, and rebuilt it, remarked when he restyled it, and we'll show you a picture of it later, that it had been damaged on the right-hand side. that there had been some kind of traffic altercation or something, and that Carl Green had to fix it. But this is the kind of condition that Daryl found it. It's sitting outside, apparently, the American Chopper side, out in sunlight. Daryl then owned the Oakland Roadster Show, was driving down the freeway and saw it, spun off the freeway, I'm sure in a crash curve, and bought the car on the site. Had it loaded up in his trailer and taken back to his shop. There's the car sitting outside. Not something that was as elegant as the first, you know, the cheesy mags and so forth. Now here's a shot of the car in Carl Green's shop. When I saw the car the first time in 1995, when I met Daryl and Donna, the car had just been delivered from Carl Green's shop. The paint was fresh. You could smell the paint. But Daryl, as he was struggling to open up the museum, and sent the car down the road to Carl Green, again, who was the fellow who did most of the body work of the Dream Truck, and it said, fix this darn thing and put a coat of paint on it and reupholster it, the upholstery inside the pot. So Carl found the same material and had a local trimster redo the interior exactly in Daryl's style. And here's one of the photographs. We've got extensive photographs of the car being repaired. And here it is after Daryl Green, Carl Green, fixed it and delivered it back to his shop. Now in 2006, the car was seen for a number of years. In 2006, Daryl, am I correct? Daryl decided that it needed a kind of comprehensive restoration that such a historic piece needed. So he took it into his shop near his home and took it apart. And I mean took it apart. Engine came out, engine was torn down, every bit and piece of the car was redone. The floorboard, having been damaged for all those years, he cut out and shaped this and welded it in. He built filler panels here, extensively reworked the body. Here's another shot from the front. You see the car's on one of those rotisserie kind of things. From the top. You notice that Daryl reworked these areas here around that encased the front suspension to make them more elegant. See the areas here reworked those. This is the original chrome firewall he put in 1960. Here's what the interior looks like without any of the upholstery in it. And as work proceeded, you can see the kind of really pretty heavy-duty show car restoration of the bodywork and so forth underneath. And here's your son painted this. One of your sons painted this, didn't he, Daryl?
Yeah, Rick, my boy.
Yes, yes. Donna sent me 3 CDs, each with images about 14.5 megabytes. These are terrific photographs. These panels, when they were painted, were taken out in their yard and hung from trees to dry in the sunlight. It's a charming stuff. And then, of course, I can't imagine bolting stuff back on the paint. This is Daryl's mix. This color is not quite the same as others. You know how photographs are. But I can't imagine reinstalling doors and worrying about chips and them not. I can't. That's more than I can do. But as you can see, Daryl did the full show car routine underneath. Now, in terms of model building, look at the opportunities for detailing here. This is not exotic like some contemporary car with IRS and all the rest, but if you want to do it right, look at all the shapes and the details. Look at all this stuff in here you've got to do. The pickup points, the upper control arms, you know, the bushings and the bolts that sit on the end of those. Look at all the opportunities there. If you're going to build a GSL level best of show model, look at the details you have to do. Augie Escano did in 1962 with that blue roadster that won the 62nd Royal Factor Show. He did a how-to article in Carmelo magazine. But Augie built working drum brakes in 1962. I've never seen anyone duplicate that. They were in 25th scale, little bitty things. But if Augie can do it in 62, so can we do it now, for heaven's sakes. But imagine if this were 8 scale. We'll talk about the big Predicta here, but what you could easily replicate all of this. Just imagine the opportunities for building an extremely detailed and sophisticated model. Daryl built filler panels that went in here, painted filler panels. But look how beautiful the frame is, the chrome rear leaf springs. How elegantly this is all finished under here. The frame and the body are the same color. Here's another shot from the other side. These all come from Donna's CD. And remember, the model, you'd have to do the backing plate here, you see? This was a Thunderbird backing plate, wasn't it, Daryl? So it's probably Ford or Bendix, you know, that kind of thing. But look at the opportunities. Here's the motor that moves the top up and down. But look at all the opportunities there are to build this correctly. And to engineer it so the body drops right on the frame and bolts on the way it did. And Dura construction. Again, the top sits on this 63 era surround and drops into the body. And there's a restock. This is, Daryl, this color is a little more true, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty close to
Yeah.
what it was originally, but yes. That's as close as I could figure using late model material.
Sure.
The original was acrylic black, or regular lacquer, and of course this is acrylic urethane actually.
Sure. This is probably 2007 here.
This is as close as I could remember.
This is about 2007.
Right.
Right. Here it is in a show. By the way, this is a Thunderbird, and it's a small car. When I was there in 1995, I'm 6'5", and I weighed less then than I do now. And I could not, Daryl was gracious, and he said, come sit in the car. He closed the bubble down to me, and I'm bent from the waist all the way over like this. My head was in the passenger seat. I saved that picture of the book, but it's a funny, funny picture. And then Daryl closed the lid on me. In his museum, it was getting hot in there, trust me. When he said it was hot, it was hot.
I notice it has baby moons, not spinners.
Yeah, that's the way he did it. Well, and the rims are also different ones. The original ones, Daryl, the original chrome reverse rims looked like they were 48 Ford, that they had the more angled approach. These are our modern chrome reverse rims.
Well, you know better than I do.
I've talked to people about finding some of those rims, and you can't get the reverse 48 Fords anymore. No one even has them in junkyards. But they were, to me, they were more beautiful because they were more angular and had more shape to them. These are modern ones. There's the car.
You get a sense of size with that.
Look at the guy standing by. They're not as tall as I am.
Yeah.
That's a small car. In fact, if you don't see a person next to it, it is deceptively small in person. You have to have a human being by it to get a sense of the real scale of it. Here's Roger Harney, since passed years ago. I want to give tribute to him. I know Daryl and Roger had their disagreements, but I got to know Harney in the late 80s, correspondent and so forth. And one day when my office was in downtown Salt Lake City, I get a huge package. I mean, it was a big, big package. And in it were all of the photographs, including negatives that Monogram took of the car when it was back there being explored. And those included, they took the car to a local gas station, they jacked it up, looked underneath, all the pictures of the car with the tape lines on it and all of that. And he sent me the original kit engineering drawings. Now these are copies because the originals are in vellum probably. But I have literally every sheet that showed how the kit was engineered. Now these are, as I say, copies. And I've made a chart. There are dates, see they have dates and artists down here. I know the dates when these were done, and I know when the dates, the kit parts were made over a 6-month period. You would think that all, and I don't know anything about kit production in those days, but you would think they would all occur within a very short period of time, maybe over 6 or 6.5 months. There's a chart in the book that shows, that reveals all the date information. I mean, there's everything here. The grill work, I mean, every feature of that car are on these drawings. It's a remarkable, and then this original, very light profile drawings of the car before it was restyled. Look at the rear wheel wells, you see. But I've got all of these, and they've all been. I took them to somebody who knows. After talking to Bob, I took them to somebody who knows how to preserve that kind of material. Had them sprayed with chemicals, and they, uttered medieval incantations over them, and they're preserved now, hopefully. But that's the reason I had them copied by a client of mine who so we now work with these, not the original ones. But in a letter from Bob Reeder in 2002, he gave me permission to possess those because, of course, they were copyrighted by Monogram Models. And so I now have, I suppose, full ownership of them, even though I supposed I had ownership when Roger Hanley sent it to me. So, but anyway, I want to give tribute to him because he was very generous with me and handed over stuff that is quite literally priceless. Where are you going to get engineering drawings for a kit done in 1963, 64? I mean, plus it's the Predicta, so. Now, as I've remarked before, they did a series of kits. Let me just briefly run through these because I know we're, oh boy. This is the original kit. You notice that the Marina Towers, the Chicago Marina Towers in the background. Here's one side, here's the other side, Daryl's image on it. Really cool and really vintage kind of text. It's kind of funny to read it these days. Here's some of the end caps. You may know that there were two versions of the plastic. The early pearl red version, which they rejected, and that's here at the top. The first 1,000 or so units were done in that plastic. But when the injection goes in, the pearlescent plastic, the plastic mixed with pearl, the feed lines would run together and there'd be dark lines as they would meet. And so it looked like crap. I mean, and no two are the same. I managed to collect about 8 of these. And no two of them are the same in terms of the patterns, because I guess they come in hotter from one side to the other. But they were getting a lot of complaints from the hobby stores. People would buy the kits and bring them back and say, this looks like crap, and they'd imagine turning them in. And so the company said, destroy, and we'll just give you credit. So a considerable number of these extremely rare kits were destroyed. But here's a comparison of the original body, and they later came back, and Roger told me they came back, and one more thing, interestingly. In this first version, this pearl red version, there's a blip. There's a line here and a line on the inside of this. It's a little embossed line, and it's a flaw in the die. They fixed that flaw, which they didn't see. So when they brought out this version here, it doesn't have it. So there's that little bit of history. Oh, these are terrible pictures. I had to just grab these to take them to the pre-digital age. But this is what the back of it looks like in pearl. That's what the trunk looked like. Now, for NNLEs this last year, with Paul Bringhurst, did some great work here. I purchased a pearl build-up one several years ago, and I gave it to Paul, and Paul cleaned it up, polished the daylights out of it, and we donated this to the NNLE show as a fundraiser for the museum. Paul polished it. I mean, look at it, for heaven's sakes. Steve Roullier fixed, oh my gosh, fixed the spelling down here. This is a reproduction box I bought off of eBay years ago, and the guy that did it misspelled some words. And so we could hardly give that to NLE, so I talked to a good friend Steve, and Steve and I laughed ourselves sick one afternoon, and so I think I scanned the stuff for him, and I sent it down, and he fixed it all up, and then I sent the box to Steve, and he pasted it all together. We're going to be reproducing this box. I have permission effectively from Vintage Monogram to do so, but this piece was sent back to NLEs. Who was at NLEs this year? Was it well received? It's pretty cool. And I want to thank Steve and Paul so much for doing this. Paul's going to be giving a seminar on craftsmanship. Pay attention. That thing looks like no human hand ever touched it. It's amazing. Here is an authentic model built by the factory. They would send these out every hobby store that had that sold a case or more would get one of these display boxes and this model that were built at factory assembly line. You'll notice that that they had a die and they painted the top of the TV body color, which of course it was. No, that's just the original decal. This photograph, I bought this off of eBay years and years ago from a hobby store that closed, and they simply put it away in the back room. The decals are silvering a bit, but those are all decals from Monogram. Here's the second box. They were changing remember the early Monogram boxes were those long rectangular versions, and they decided to change things for marketing purposes. Here's the second version. Here's the third one. As other kit art was changing, they did this. Look at the vibrancy of that color, and look at this. Okay, the photographs were not doing well. Then they sent the dies. Ed Sexton told me, I bought 2 New Zealand kits from him 30 years ago. They sent the dies to New Zealand, and they produced them down there for that part of the world. This is essentially the third version, and it didn't open the top, they had end flaps that opened, and it had cellophane on it. So this is literally one of those, I bought two from you, this is one of them. Here are comparisons of the box art, this is number 2, this is number 3. See how they changed things? Still in number 2, you had the original style of this, and up there, they're much more business-like. The other side of the box, I'm rushing because we've got so much to cover today. Here are the end flaps, more end flaps. Here's one of the boxes. This is the 2000 version. I was honored, Ed Sexton called me and asked me to write the card for the inside, and I did that. I was very pleased to do that for him. Oh, this is the kit instruction from New Zealand. It was a really crappy photo reproduction. I don't think they had copy machines in New Zealand in 1968, but that's what this is. It's just like the earlier versions, but it obviously deteriorated. This is the 1990 version. Ed Sexton let me build the box art. Notice here, you see how this radius does not invade the line? And this is too bulbous. Steve Roullier will walk you through that later. Here's the end flap of that. Here's the 2000 version. You notice the color of the car has been re-intensified. There's that car is in the 2000 version and that. I'm sorry to go, oh. Sometime in 1966, the Kelly Tire Company ripped Darrell off and ripped Monogram off too. They had this as a tire promotion. What car do you think that is? You send in $1, they say, and we'll send you the car, we'll send you this car. They never named Darrell, they never named the car. No credit was given to Monogram, to Darrell, to anybody else. And so you send $1 and they sent you the third issue of the kit, okay, for $1, postpaid. Here are the decals inside. You're supposed to put those on your tires.
Yes.
Those are literally the decals. I didn't know about this till eBay came around and I found the darn thing. Here's the bottom of the promo sheet. See up here? I'm sorry we have to go through this so fast. Then they got further ripped off in 1980, I can't remember, in the mid-80s. A company in Hong Kong decided to rip them off and do a friction model and a battery-powered model. I talked to Handley, he said he never knew of this. But here is the friction, there's the battery. I got this one, oh my gosh. I got this one from the Netherlands and this one came out of Australia.
Are those a direct copy of the original kit?
No, all the dimensions are correct, but you notice it has a steering wheel, the dashboard's missing. The body mics out within 20 thousandths in every dimension. They got a kit, so I don't know how they did that, but they didn't get Monogram size, I know that much. But the bodies are very, very close, but they screwed around with the interior. Here are the end panels, where the batteries go in. Lovely little batteries. Look at this atrocious illustration on an end flap. Other side of the box. Here they are together.
With a racing helmet.
Yes, yes.
Imagine how hot that was.
Oh, let's not talk about that. No, I received this because I don't know who I received this from, but about the time the 2000 kit was issued, this box shows up in my office one day, and it contains a great plastic test shot. I have no idea, Handley was still the company at the time, but Rieger had passed, Besser had passed, and this showed up. And then they notice the size of the box. It's the 2000 issue box. A white test shot shows up, and I have no idea who sent these to me. I have no clue. Here's the white test shot. Here's the original factory produced promo model they sent to the office stores. You can see they had a little die. I have a photograph. They drop this little die over it, and these women on the assembly line and put them all together. Again, there's the box. That's the original box. You notice it's got patina up here at the top. Okay, we're really going to blast through this now. The kit is really wrong. It's not the right length, it's not the right width. I'm just going to run through a series of photographs that we're concerned about to make sure that the model, Lynn will detail some of it, but we're literally going to produce some 3D or some resin-based replacement kits. I have permission from Ed Sexton to do so. copyright releases and all that stuff. But I want to show you some of the areas of the kit that do not match the car. The door isn't right. Daryl had a rolled edge down here when he restyled it for monogram that doesn't show up in the kit. See the back of the door? There's the rocker panel. You can see the roll over there with the shadow. This area through here is too short in the kit. And of course, the real issue is up around here. You can see how it invades that line. This is complete, the kit, it's like they were on some exotic compound from the Middle East or something. And they didn't do that well at all. The bubble top's not the correct height, width, or length, and it's mispositioned on the model. So, here's where I was testing Daryl's patience with me. I took these photographs and pasted them together, drew some lines and said, with a guide in the bottom, said, Daryl, please provide the instructions or the information. He went out and did so. He did this several times, you can see. And Daryl and I just laughed at how badly the kit was off. This was taken in monogram in late 1963 when the car was being photographed for promotional purposes. Here's that prop. Look at this. Can't you tell how wrong that is? And how this line doesn't invade? It's just terrible. We're getting close to the time we talk about the mechanical stuff, but one of the things we're doing, Bob Wick is doing some mechanical illustrations for the book that we'll use in the kit production. But Daryl combined a Chrysler power steering unit and a Thunderbird power steering unit hooked together with bell cranks and levers and so forth, so that the stick moved forward, moving back and forward, would turn the wheels left and right. It's ingenious. It's American genius at its best. And so I sent this back to Daryl, and he wrote, that's Daryl's handwriting, okay? This is really cool. And sent this all back. Here are more measurements. All right, I think this is yours now. That's you, my friend. Steve Roullier, who is he's been very patient and working
Am I on? Okay, I'm on. Okay, I'm just going to show you a few things I did with some fairly basic Photoshop skills. Is that better? Yeah, thanks. So this is the profile shot you've seen a few times before, taken in Oak Park. And here are the lines. So Mark says to me, can we get all those lines on one picture and kind of make it clear so that it's readable? So this is what I came up with. And so it was a real challenge to kind of squeeze all those lines in on just on one picture there. But I think you can, I think most of them are kind of legible. Here's a back shot, probably taken in Oak Park again. So, and here are the measurements. And, you know, cropped down a little bit and all those measurements on there. So the next thing is a little more challenging is Mark had this picture, color picture taken in Oak Park, but as you can see the front's chopped off and the back is just kind of barely there. So Mark says, can we restore that so we can see what the front looks like and you know, make it look more like it's supposed to look. So here, this is a kind of a later version, but basically what I did was went to that earlier black and white profile shot, chop out a little section in the front, paste that in and use a guide to kind of just Photoshop that in using a lot of you know, drawing tool and some cut and paste and try to match that color as well as possible, match the highlights so it all looks pretty good. And so then once I had the car looking the way it was supposed to look, then putting in the landscaping is a lot more forgiving than putting in, you know, trying to paint a car to look like it's supposed to look. So here it is with all the landscaping cloned in, and also the little back shadow had to be kind of cloned in so that all looks pretty right, I think. Then the next thing was, again, back to the profile shot. Mark says, can we take a picture of the model and overlay the model and this image together and see where the differences might be? So I looked at this photo and I'm thinking, okay, this photo's taken in the early 60s. I'm trying to think, okay, what kind of lenses did people have in those days? And most people had pretty much standard lenses, which would be like a 50mm lens. So I got out my kit and, you know, pulled the kit off the shelf, put the major components together, mocked it up in a little photo booth, just set a basic point and shoot camera to 50mm, which is basically what your eye sees in normal. It's not a wide angle, it's not a telephoto. Just put it up on a couple little improvisational stands here, took a picture of it, then you know, Photoshop again, just cut away everything that wasn't the kid. And tried to line this up as best as possible with the view that you see in that profile shot. Then overlaid them together. Now the first time, Mark says it's not that far off. It's not quite that far off. So then I had to look at it and see, okay, where are the discrepancies? Maybe I'm not lining it up really quite right. So the second effort was this, where it's getting a little closer. It's starting to line up a little better, but you can also start to see where the kit's off compared to the real car. And then the final version, which, again, I'm saying to Mark, is that this is not an exact science here. This is not, this is not 3D scanning. This is just kind of a guide to what, may or may not work. And again, lining up the wheelbase, because I think the kit wheelbase is correct. Is that right?
Correct.
So at least we know
Okay,
something
it
is
is.
correct about the kit, and that's the wheelbase. So if you line up the wheelbase, everything starts to kind of follow from there, and then try to, line up everything as best as possible. And I think this was like about the final version where we got to, and you can kind of start to see where things are correct and where things are not so correct. And I think that's what I got. If any, like I say, my Photoshop skills are fairly basic. If anybody wants to ask me the specifics of some of this later, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But I'm not an advanced Photoshop guy. And,
So the next thing we're going to talk about, we talked about the analog approach to fix things that way. The other obvious approach is to scan the car with Daryl's permission. Run some people there who would run computers and lasers on it to measure the exact dimensions of it so we get a proper kit. Lynn Koberna has some experience with that. So Lynn, it's all yours for a few minutes.
Personal valet here. Are we live? Good. Okay, this is really geeky stuff. This is way out there. About a month ago, Mark talked to me about using Steve's dimensions and drawings to come up with a 3D model that we could 3D print for the Predicta. And so I offered to do an experiment. There's two methods of capturing digital data. One's called photogrammetry, the other one's called laser scanning. And I had just started learning some software that the Smithsonian Institute uses to capture reality that they use in their virtual reality displays for showing dinosaurs and fossils and mummies, things like that. And so I started to mess with that, and I says, well, Mark, let me experiment with this, see if we can't use photogrammetry to capture the body lines of the Predicta. So I took the Predicta model and I painted it white, and you can see there's some little dots on it that I put. Those are called calibration dots. And when you do photogrammetry, what you do is you shoot all the way around stuff, a couple of hundred of shots, different angles down and this way, and about 10 degrees around. So I did that. I had set up a turntable. I did that, and then you send those images off to the cloud, and they have a software that processes that, and what you get back is a 3D mesh in full color. Well, I did that, and it sort of worked. I would say it was a fail. I'm still working with it, but that's what we started with. And then the next phase is the laser scanning, and I'm going to show you a video about that in a minute. And the thing you want to realize is that this occurs in phases. The first phase is that you have to prep the object that you're scanning, and so you'll see some of these calibration dots on the objects in the video, and I want to point that out to you. The next thing you need to watch for is what they call a point cloud. And a point cloud is the laser shoots a beam to the object, it bounces back, and the reflection is captured by the scanner, the electronic scanner. And they measure the angles and the time that it takes to do that, and from that they can actually create points in 3D space all over. And those points then become a point cloud. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Then the points are connected, they're triangulated, so that you have a triangular mesh, and it's digital. And this is not a CAD file, this is a digital mesh file. And then you can tweak that, adjust that, scale that, refine it, take off any of the inaccuracies that show up. And then you take that mesh file and you convert it to a CAD file. And what's unique about a CAD file is it's a lot smaller than the mesh file digitally, and it converts to splines and lines and geometric shapes of CAD, and you can manipulate those. So and then you take the CAD file, and this is where the human touch comes in. You still have to have a lot of hand craftsmanship to make things look right. There's an artistic side to this. So Tyler, let's just do the video first. And so I'll point out some things. Watch for the mesh, watch for the CAD file.
This one, right, Lynn?
Yes, that's the one. Do we have sound? We don't need it, it's mostly music. Okay, so you can see the dots. Those are the calibration dots. And he's holding a scanner. He's doing an auto body here. Notice the dots. This is the hand scanner. So all of that's to send signals to the surface and bounce back and capture the differences in time and angles. So we actually have a company local in Salt Lake City that's willing to look at that. So we're negotiating with them to see if this will work for the Predicta project. So the image up here that you see forming that's live image as it's formed on the computer screen. It happens in real time.
Is that an expensive process?
It's several $1,000s.
We're negotiating with them.
This would be a real coup for their company to have this in their portfolio. So this is the mesh output. Okay, that's what it looks like in mesh. So the applications are many, many, many. So here's, now watch this. This is the mesh that just converted to the CAD file. See the difference? Mesh, and that's CAD.
Will they do the software conversion for you?
Yeah, if we pay them.
Yeah. another couple thousand. Or negotiate.
Yeah.
Strong arm.
So one of the things you can do is inspect these things, so we can test the digital files to see if they'll actually hold up in production in plastic. So, that's the company we're working with. Thanks, Tyler. So one of the things that scanning will do for us is it will solve the parallax problem that we have, and we'll get actual digital measurements in reality. We'll have reality capture. So that's all I have, but if anybody wants to talk to me about this process or 3D modeling or 3D printing, I'll be available at the trade show 7 to 11 tomorrow morning, and you can just come by and we'll talk. Thanks.
Thank you. We need to get to that next session. Can we spool forward to where we were, Tyler? I read the next section. Well, I just need to put the clicker there. I want to briefly describe the three kinds of kits we're going to do. Again, with the permission of Monogram, I've negotiated with them and they're okay with us. I think they wanted just to get rid of me too, so I think there was a lot of strong-arm consent going on there. It helps.
Where you're at.
Okay, thank you. We were beyond where we were. Well, okay. Jim, I guess we put you here. You're next.
I'm next, huh?
You are. No.
Hello? I'm going to be a moving target. I'm going to sit down. Tell you what I love about the model car hobby. For 4 days, I can wear blue jeans and a t-shirt. These guys are overdressed. Okay. Okay. This is the Star Custom Shop. This is where Daryl started his work on these custom cars. And why is this important? This is the birthplace of the Predicta. And what we want to do is we want to reproduce this in 1/24 scale so that we can tell a story. We can take pictures inside of the models that will be built. Like Predicta will be partially in progress and we'll take pictures. This shop is very interesting. The north end over here was what Daryl bought first. This north end was a chicken coop. And I think his wife probably thought, gee, he's going to be a chicken farmer. We're going to make a lot of money. But instead, Daryl expanded the shop out and built this in this part here. So my challenge was to come up with a 1/24 scale diorama of this. That's my challenge. And what we had a lot of pictures of inside. And you have to ignore the cars. The pictures were taken of the cars, and I had to look way beyond the cars and look at all this neat detail of the roof and the bricks that was made out of block construction. So I'm looking at everything but the cars. And you can see here more detail. Notice it's a 8 by 16 inch block construction, and the different kind of garage doors we have, that the tracks are hanging from the rafters and the lights. That's what I'm looking at. So I looked at these photographs. I kept looking at them and looking at them. You can even see here it looks like a bottled soda pop machine. Is that what that is? Pepsi, Coke?
Actually, that's paint storage.
Oh, is it? That's paint storage?
Right there, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, I noticed there was soda pop here. That's why I thought maybe that was a soda machine, but anyway.
It goes back to the paint room there, and the storage for paint was on the outside there.
Oh, okay, got it. So I'm looking at all these different photographs and learning and figuring out what this shop looked like inside. And here's an interesting shot. This is, of course, the Predicta, but look behind that. Notice that radiator cowl there. And notice all that hand-done graffiti. It was done by a pinstriper, probably testing out his gun before he starts painting. So I want to reproduce all that. So it'll be kind of fun to try and figure out how to do that.
Actually, King George was the guy that did all that hard work.
Okay. I got to also figure out, these are all black and white. There must be some color in that.
Right.
So I got to figure out how to colorize it. And here's another great shot. Now, Mark wanted me to use the word modest. This is a modest facility building beautiful cars. I'd say it's kind of junky. But that's the beauty of it. See all this junk he has everywhere. All these things. There's a wooden Pepsi box. There's the car sitting on a wheel and it looks like a box of some sort. Anyway, all this junk in here is what I get to reproduce. And what's amazing is he built this beautiful show car in a place like this. That's the fascinating thing about it. So I started counting bricks here. I'm trying to count these bricks to figure out how big this building is, and maybe guessing is 24 center, 2x4s. So I'm trying to figure out how to dimension this building. Well, something interesting happened. I was reading an article and I came up with the address. I figured out what the address of this place was in Wichita. And trying to figure out how big this building is, and I got the address. What do you think I did? No. Well, yeah, I drove to Kansas. No. Google. Google. I looked at the address, and they drove the little Google car all around this building, and I could move the cursor around, and I could get in front of it, and I could count how many bricks, how many blocks there are between that door and the wall, between the window. And if you notice, most of the building's still there, but we replaced the chicken coop area with another big garage portion of it. And they put in a railroad crossing device here. That's another thing they did. But you see, I could go around the building with my cursor on the computer. Anybody can do this, and we can figure out how big it is. They built a window here. That was one of the garage doors. There's another garage door was here, and there's still one there, and there's still one there. So anyway, using Google, it helped me a great deal figuring out how big this building is. And then, next thing I did was, it also told me which end was north and south. And then I began to draw drawings. This one is in 1/48 scale drawing. And then I made one in 1/24 scale drawing, which was bigger. And we sent them to Daryl, and he graciously helped comment on the drawing and, correct some of the things I had guessed at. And finally we came up with what the building should look like. And using this drawing and all the information I had, I built some cardboard mock-up in 1/87 scale, so I could use the little cars. And I sent these to Mark, so he could think about how he wanted to lay out this building, and how we might cut the roof off and cut the roof open and kind of make it see what it would look like. So he has these, and it helps us figure out. Like for instance, Daryl, I was trying to figure out what this space was. That's the bathroom. So I asked him, what is that space? He said, that's where the toilet was. I said, of course, there had to be a place to relieve yourself. So I figured out what that was. So what I built was, now I want you to all put your hands on the table because I need a drum roll. Ready? Okay. So this is another mock-up in cardboard of what the shop is going to look like in 1/24 scale. And what this allows us to do is cut it up, chop it up. If it's not right, put another door in, or another window in. You do this in cardboard, so it's easy to modify. And it comes apart. You can see there's a little bit of detail on the lights and all. You can leave that one down. You build rafters so that it'll look correct. And then you can work on the inside, and you can put doors and windows and furniture and stuff like that until you figure out exactly what you want it to look like before you build a real 1/24 scale diorama. So that's about my presentation. I'll have this down on display in the model room in case you want to ask me some questions about it. But This is basically what I'm doing now, is I'm trying to figure out the different parts and how I'm going to build it. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge because it's all block construction. So I have to figure out how to make the blocks look right from the outside and from the inside, because Mark will be taking pictures. So that's where we're at with it right now.
You can 3D print those, right?
We can what?
3D print those bricks?
Yeah. I'm gonna lay brick every. Thank you. Who's next?
Where's the clicker?
End of the
He
table.
wants that laser confuser.
Let me see where we are.
Is this on? Yeah, okay.
Before we get to Bob, let me briefly explain the three kits we're going to do. I'll go through this really fast. We're going to do a 62 version of the kit, and that's this car before it was restyled. This was taken by Robert Hagee, and who's, I have the copyright disclosure down here. His nephew has been cleaning these photographs up for us that Bob took. They are some of the best ones that are available from that era. Give really incredible detail. Hagee, that's the way you pronounce it, was a superb photographer. And with Robert's help, who has worked for National Geographic and the Smithsonian, he's been able to really polish these images up for our use. So, in 1962, about the time that Darrell signed up as a custom car consultant, this display went out into each hobby store that wanted one. It was called the Custom Car Lot, you see up here? And they would supply this whole setup. It's an enormous setup. Through the grace of whoever, about 12 years ago, I found this on eBay. Some hobby store had it, and it was all there. It came in a big, beat-up, ratty box. I've got the whole thing. So we're going to, that original was a museum. Mr. Wick and I are going to screw around with this one, and we're going to make it into what if Darrell had been, what if the Predicta, 62 version of Predicta had been part of this display, and we're going to paste it in. We're going to fool around history. It's going to be a lot of fun. Here's the advertisement that went in various magazines. So we're going to take the Duesenberg out and put the 62 Predicta in here. Okay. Many of the rest of these were all influenced by Darrell's hot rod and styling ideas. This is his booklet from Carbs to Customizing. It showed up many of the kits of the 64 era. This is the magazine advert. They had these everywhere. But we're going to remake the ads. The art that will be for the 62 kit, we're going to tap into the art from that era too. Remember, this was influenced by Darrell also. You remember these kits with the big flat rectangular box? So we're going to tap into all, Mr. Wick's going to tap into all of this art. And this was the original display for the 62 stuff. So we're going to morph this around and try and recreate what it would have been like had a 62 kit been issued. That's part of the fun of this. Then we're going to do a Halo kit. Look, Harney told me that they wanted to do a superb version of this kit in answer to Johann's turbine car kit. But that someone in the corporate establishment got cold feet, didn't want to spend the money, so they brought the kit out as they did. But what if they decided to do an answer to Johann's kit? So we're going to try and answer the question. Mr. Wick has done this artwork here. We're going to redo the box. We're going to do a whole box for it. This is his schematic sketch. This is the early work from Brad Leisure, who I retained to do some of the work. We're going to redo with Mr. Mark Jones. Are you here? Anyway, Mark's going to step in and redo the decals for that era. And we're going to see this stuff down here. We're going to start to fool around with these ads too. Again, this has to do with the whole question of which version of the engine do we portray. This is the 4-carb version. These are 1960 Falcon glass bowl carburetors that Darrell used at one point. And of course the steering gear, Bob will talk about in a minute. We're going to tap into all of this kind of thing. And then, what if, I talked to Darrell about this yesterday, in 1963, Ford Motor Company was prowling around the car shows and trying to get customizers to sign up for the Ford Custom Car Caravan, which was an internal hot rod performance and custom car thing they had. But what if that knucklehead Jack Pacino, who ran the thing for Ford and Lincoln Mercury, had approached Darrell? It's the only guy they ever talked to. what would it have been like? The real Predicta showed up in the custom car caravan, AMT's version of the custom car caravan, they call it the California van. So we're going to speculate on this history. What if, to participate in the Ford program, he had to run a Ford engine? The Predicta is a small car. What if Ford had supplied a K-motor, 271 horse K-motor, you put the Weber carburetors on, and they had paid Darrell an enormous sum of money to run the Ford equipment, Monogram had bought the car, we're going to have a lot of fun with this history. What if the car, the Predicta, had showed up in part of the Ford Caravan? Here's the Weber induction we're going to reproduce, the shop kits and so forth. And here's the much maligned and properly so Silhouette, which beat Darrell unfairly in 1963. And then we're going to do the big Predicta. You remember these ads? It's like Captain Picard there. These are all original adverts from that era. So we're going to produce this in the Halo version in 8 scale, using 3D printing. I don't know how we'd ever do an injection molded body, bankrupt 300 people, but we're going to tap into this whole era and do it. And here's Bob Wick's layout, at least early layout version of what that box would look like. Now compare that, oh my gosh, compare that. See how Bob picked up on some of these motifs? And there you go. Now, I want to turn the time now to Bob for a few minutes. I've asked Bob to illustrate the mechanical systems of this car, which are complex, innovative, and so with Darrell's gracious help over a long time, he has responded to various iterations that Bob has done of these drawings, and Mike Smith locally, a hot rod mechanic, has helped. Bob is all yours.
Thank you.
There are no illustrations up there.
So what I've got is not going to be on the screen. I've got stuff that you guys can look at. It'll be on display on the table. But this is going back to, all of this has been about research. That really is the core of this. It's a concept and how you research the execution of that concept to do a convincing presentation of whatever it is you're trying to do. A lot of this has been digital. In this case, I'm back to analog. What I do is to get the best resource materials I can. Again, these are the mechanical systems. A car like this is fairly complex and unusual because, for example, the stick steering is an entirely different approach to how you would control the vehicle. The fact that it was driven from both sides, or drivable from both sides. Whoa, well, that didn't go well. Thank you. That's better. So what I've done is put together based on whatever materials I could get. Some of it has been photographs, some of the stuff you've seen before. A lot of this really has to do with the mechanical systems, and translate those into a series of drawings so that everybody who's involved in various parts of this can look at them, comment on them, and then they can, I can go back and redraw them and modify them based on what those responses are. So the way this basically has worked is I would do an initial drawing of each one of the elements that we were trying to calculate and figure out. In this case, it's the fuel system. So this is the information that I got from Darrell, and then I translated that into something that is cleaner. It's not accurate in terms of exactly how the lines were run, but it tells what's connected to what and where it goes. So those then are returned to Darrell. Mark got a copy, Mike Smith got a copy, and on those, additional comments and questions were raised, and that's how this is refined. It's a give and take. This is spread out over the country in terms of where people are, so there's that lag time that has to be built into when I do something. reproduce it, put the packages together to send everybody, ship it out. They have to have time to review it. So again, all of this is very time consuming. That's why these projects take such a long time. The same thing with the diorama, the 3D scanning, all of that stuff. So when you're looking at these kinds of detailed projects, and these just really massive things, you've got to build a time frame in that allows you to do all of this stuff, and you have to be aware of it. Now, we get into stuff like not just the fuel system, but all of the linkages that ran the carburetors from the fuel, from the gas pedal on. Again, an original sketch from Daryl. This is what I translated into. When I send this stuff back to everybody, I reproduce the original information and then what I did with it, so that there is a way for them to respond to it and to indicate the additions and changes that need to be made. One of the, and I know you guys can't really see this stuff, again, it'll be up here on the table, but the steering, there we go, using, and there's a photograph in here I'll put with this of the Chrysler box and then the Thunderbird box, and how all of that was used to translate the side to side and front and forward motion of the stick to get the steering to work, how the boxes were connected, how they were mounted, all of that kind of stuff. So this is the kind of thing that really involves a lot of people, and here's another one. This was the drawing of the fuel system that I sent out. These are the notes that came back from Daryl, and Mike also sent a set of those, and then it was modified again based on that. So that's the process and the procedure that we go through. Again, all of this, from my end, really has to be hand drawn. There's nothing that you can draw from photographs in terms of refining this stuff in any better way than doing it as illustrations or drawings or mechanical drawings or whatever is required. It's not necessarily a high degree of skill in doing these drawings as much as it is for the builder to understand what it is that they have to do to execute it properly. And as long as whatever the drawings are done to whatever the builder needs to have to work from, that's fine. But again, it is a matter of not only the research, but coordinating all of that stuff and then putting it into a form so that whoever's going to be doing those various things can use to take it forward and build from there. That's basically all that I've got. Again, it's a exercise in research and then applying that research to whatever the project is going to be. These will be up here, I'm assuming, on this table. You can take a look at them. I can answer any questions you've got. But that's another part of doing the development of all of this stuff. It's not the glamorous body work and all of that stuff that shows, but it's the details that make it a convincing model. So that's it. Mark, turn this back to you.
Thank you. These illustrations in final form will be an appendix in the book, and will also be used when we craft the parts for the kits, because of course those have to be authentic too. Our last part of our presentation tonight is a tribute to a fellow from Arizona by the name of Bob Peoples. In 1961, I believe, he scratch-built the Predicta well before there was a kit of the first version of the car. And it is so remarkable, I wanted to share these photographs with you. I mean, we can be snippy this time and say, well, this dimension's off and that deep, but give me a break. He was a young man, 1961, and he nailed it. I mean, he just had a sense of proportion and style. He gave this to me 10 years or so ago, and it's one of my most treasured possessions. I mean, it's just so cool. Notice what he did here? He caught the original, the really early instrument pods, the copper color instrument pods around the car.
How did he do that bubble top? Vacuum formed that?
I think he vacuum formed it.
Yeah, vacuum
Bob was working only for photographs. I have two more presentations here. I showed this to you. Whenever you come up, I want to make this presentation of Starbird's. this is the ad mounted from 1967. Online, there's a fellow from Canada who did a color version of this, using a real image of the Predicta. And so I had this mounted too. And I want the Starbirds to take this home with it. You notice that in the original, there's the kit illustration of the Predicta, but this is a real one that he's done. Mr. Roullier and I are going to, with the help of Karen Nielsen locally, we're going to reproduce this way and use photographs of both cars just for the sheer fun of it. But would someone come and hand this to the Starbirds, please? Paul, thank you. Thank you. Two last things, then you can escape. Dano has here a handout. The Predicta project will be publishing from time to time fact sheets on the car and its history. They have to do with clarifying certain bits of history. The first one has to do with this. He's got all of these. There's one for each of you. Of that, okay, very good. There's also a sign-up sheet going around. If you, that's where. Okay, I don't want addresses. Give me your emails, okay? And I'll put you on the address, and when we publish things, you'll be automatically notified. So, thank you all for coming and dropping into this insanity. And I want to specifically thank these fellows here and all those who showed up early for their wonderful contributions, and certainly to the Starbirds who I've idolized Daryl since I was a kid, and it's so wonderful to have them here. And thank you for graciously showing up and putting up with us, Daryl and Donna.
I'd like to make one comment if I may.
Please.
I did the easy part, I just built a real car.